If you don't think we get enough lists during the year in this BuzzFeed world that we live in, well, the year's about to end, and that's where we really double down on the list. So we've got a list of the most Googled terms in 2014. All right, so we're gonna hit a couple of these. So Robin Williams was the most Googled term in 2014. So what surprised me about that, just real quick, is that that was just an instance that happened. It happened one day, obviously, and then it was a burst for a week.
It was a shock.
But it wasn't something that was going on all year. So I thought that even though it was shocking, of course, that the net sort of usage of that term, I'm surprised that it was the number one thing. World Cup number 2, that was obviously huge for the 2 months or so that it was going on. Ebola, the Malaysia Airlines, I want to talk a bit more about that. The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, Flappy Bird.
I don't even know what
Flappy Bird is an app. I didn't even download it. I fought the power. I'd never have played Flappy Bird.
Never heard of it. I fought harder than you did.
Conchita Wurst, which we did a little research on. We'll tell you about that in a second. ISIS, obviously, is no surprise. Frozen was one of the big movies of the year. And the Sochi Olympics. So these were the top 10 most searched terms on
I have to apologize
Google.
again.
Yeah.
I keep clearing my throat because I have such bad post-nasal drip, so I'm really sorry.
That was actually, number 11 was post-nasal drip. Cathy Ladman.
Number 11!
You know when you put Cathy Ladman into Google,
What do you get?
it goes post-nasal drip.
Autocomplete.
It
I
comes up
can't
that
help
way.
it. I can't solve it.
So is there anything on that
Such
list,
an
Andy,
old
that
Jew.
surprised you in any way? It basically sort of shook out somewhat.
Yeah, Robin
What do you think,
Williams
right?
as the number one term is surprising, absolutely, and sad.
Yeah.
And I think that if you do look at all of the things that are sort of in the top 10 list, it is a really good snapshot of sort of what we thought about and what we were really conceived. That's not the right word.
We were post-conceived.
We were preoccupied with during the year last year. I'm curious though to think about what your guys' top Google searches was. For me, it was of course Andy Riesmeyer because
What's people saying about me today?
Well, the thing is, like, how many times would you repeat Google anything other than yourself?
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know how. Usually my Googling involves my partner, my fiance now I could say.
Yes.
He cooks a lot, so a lot of times he yells things out of the kitchen,
Yes.
a measurement thing. So I
Right.
Google measurements a lot.
Right.
That's my
Okay.
right. Or
Google-
just not little factoids.
Yeah, I don't think I think I Google constantly, and I love it, and I can't believe that it hasn't been around my whole life. But I don't think there's anything that I Google predominantly.
Do you guys think that there's less stuff in your brains now because of this? Like, you don't have to store.
You don't have to.
You don't have to keep information. I remember when I was a kid, like playing Trivial Pursuit with my family, and my uncles, especially my uncle and my dad, were so amazing at remember every little fact about World War II and the date that this happened and that happened. And I feel like nobody of the next generation, probably starting with Gen X, don't remember things in that way because we can just go to the
Well,
computer.
but see, back to my head, back to me being like a physics experiment that we mentioned last time. But the things that I don't need to keep in my brain,
You get rid of.
I get rid of. Phone numbers, don't remember those much anymore.
Yeah.
But it gets filled with other stuff. My friend used to have a theory that your brain is like a bucket, and you can only fit as much into it as you can.
Yeah.
And if you leave room in the bucket, then more stuff will come into it. So I don't remember certain things that are so easily accessible now.
Yeah. I have a good friend who's a actuary, which is the most exciting of all occupations.
That's so
and
crazy.
we always joke that my brain is like a warehouse, but like a bomb went off, and there's a ton of stuff, but it takes a while to get to. And his brain is like a really small, organized closet. You can, there's not a lot in there, but you can get to it pretty quick.
Right.
So
Because he knows-
great guy.
Because
though.
you have to have, there have to be sort of like labels that you, it's like why you can't remember a person's name, you have to kind of develop a system.
Yeah.
Like this person, I remember, his name is Bill because he has that baseball cap all
There's
the
some
time.
scientific
something,
term
and
for
I
that.
don't do that enough. but there are
Mnemonic
certain-
device, right?
Yeah, right,
Mnemonic
and thank you. But there are certain people that whose names I just cannot.
So the Robin Williams thing,
Yeah.
why I think that's particularly interesting, as I said, is that because it was this burst, and that it still became the number one. So what does that say about us? Like when we all share this, like, in this case, a pretty horrific thing. What does that
it's a
say?
phenomenon.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't want to answer.
well, I mean, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct, though. It's like, and I did a couple of papers about this back in college, where the ability to access a lot of different things all at once sort of has created a divergent pattern for like our cultural experiences. So it's like, because there's so many different kinds of artists that you can listen to from a music perspective, like you don't have to have a room where everybody knows what's going on. So when these moments happen, these MASH finale style moments.
Yeah.
You know, where like everybody goes to the bathroom at the commercial break, so like the water table lowers. Because they're all so involved in the show. Those kinds of things, when they happen, well, it's unfortunate that, you know, he passed away, of course. It is sort of special that like all of us for like a moment are sort of, even if we are Googling, doing the same thing.
It's like because we're in such an isolated society that we all kind of converged like this in a very modern way.
Yeah.
But I also think that what that says is that, you know, to a lot of people, Robin Williams was an incredible source of joy.
Yeah.
And for him to die in that way rocked so many people's worlds, I think.
That's interesting. So you think maybe even if he had died in another way, let's say it had just been a car accident, that it wouldn't have got the traction. So it really was so.
Well, I think it was because to people who don't get the personality of the comic, which is a lot of people. The fact that he took his own life and suffered from depression, where to people he was like a savior. He was the light, and he didn't have the light.
Yeah.
I think that was a really tragic moment for people.
Absolutely. All right. So the last one that I want to touch on real quick, the Malaysian plane.
Yeah.
Everyone talked about it for that month. CNN did like 2 months of wall-to-wall, endless speculation, which was always prefaced by saying we're not going to speculate what happened, and then they'd speculate for 2 hours. We never found the plane, which I think is kind of interesting. So they force this stuff down our throats. It's who the hell knows what happened? It's a pretty sick story, actually, if you really think about it, that we never found this plane. But so we were force-fed it by the media for that amount of time. It never resolved itself, and now we never talk about it.
Right.
So what does that say about how we
just
ingest?
Moved on to the next thing that's being forced down our throats. I mean, if you've watched CNN for the past 4 weeks, it's all been protesting, been police violence like nonstop. They'll do a breaking news alert at the top of every hour, and it'll be literally the exact same thing over and over and over again. And I think that, you know, CNN's model, and especially like with all the other sort of national news organizations, to sort of like just think that like they can get behind a thing that's just going to get them traction and just push it until it's dead, might work for casual viewers, but for people like us, you know, who watch a lot, maybe it's really horrible.